All right. I think we are live now, and thanks for joining today. I think Vishal has been a good friend of mine, and then we met more than a couple of times at various conferences in Pune at meetups. And then I thought whenever I started doing this, I have a couple of people in my mind, and Vishal is probably like the first or the second person who thought okay, I should definitely talk to him about this, and more of this information that we are sharing on this place is very useful. And then Vishal also has come up with a lot of things that what he could tell to people and like communities. I'm really glad, and thanks for joining everyone again. So we are live, and we have Vishal here today, and then we'll quickly get to the topic without delaying further delay. Hi Vishal, welcome. And then I would definitely I know you very well, but then I would definitely want yourself to kind of introduce and talk a bit about yourself, what you do, and things that you kind of do at the organization that you work. More about that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Arvind. Thanks for inviting me. Excited to be here. As you said, Vishal, I work in InfraCloud. I'm CTO and founder at InfraCloud. We mostly deal with cloud-native technologies, and today that stands to be container, Kubernetes, and the whole cloud-native landscape. Like bunch of technologies in that space. We've been doing like product engineering, consulting, and kind of interesting stuff with some cutting-edge problems in that space. My interest personally lies more around the general adopting, cloud-native in enterprises. Also, serverless technology. Like I'm committed to a project called Fission. It's a serverless project on top of Kubernetes, and that's been one of my kind of personal interest areas for a while now. It's an exciting time to be in. We are seeing so much change in last. Like I remember from Cheif Puppet days to Salt to Docker, and then Kubernetes, Mesos. I almost thought Mesos will win the race, and here we are today in exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I heard about DCOS, I believe you would have heard about DCOS and Mesosphere and a lot of these things. I even saw the demos of the Verizon at some conference of Verizon, where they demonstrated around 1 lakh of containers instantly getting deployed, and never thought that someone never thought about the Docker and a lot of other things. But then that is how tech is, right? That is how things change at a rapid pace, and new things come on it, which is also good for us as a person who talks to developers or do coding, and also it's really useful for us. But then Vishal, can you tell a bit deeper about what you do, and specifically we know that we spoke about your journey from being a non-computer science student to a computer science world, like being a mechanical engineer to computer science. Can you please talk about that, or tell about us more about that?
Sure. So I graduated from mechanical engineering way back 2004, and I loved what I did. As part of my studies, fluid mechanics was probably one of my kind of favorite subjects. But as was the job market back then, hardly any jobs in the core industry. I was not the best academic performer, at least so to speak. And then there was, I think, the wave of the larger IT companies hiring by the numbers, so to speak. I got into one of the bigger companies, got trained onto kind of software technologies for the first time. I, of course, did very basic C programming in my third year as part of the academic curriculum, but that's all my encounter with software engineering, so to speak, was, right? So I would say the first 3-4 years really went into understanding various aspects. I actually worked probably in a support role for almost a year, and I would say that is probably one of the most valuable things that we often underestimate. I learned a lot about systems like Linux, Unix, but I also learned a lot about customer empathy. What really matters to customers is what eventually matters to the product, company, organization. So that was a very good learning curve, I would say. And I was initially in a domain kind of focused role. Then I realized, I have to kind of move forward and, get into more and more technology. So around 2009, I attended a Google Dev Fest in Pune. I heard about Google App Engine, and I was like, wow, this looks pretty cool. And then I went back to US as part of my work, and I started writing about Google App Engine for an Australian website. So I'm working in US, writing for an Australian website, just exploring things like Google App Engine, Cloud Foundry, pretty exciting times. And I thought, this is super cool. And once I did that for almost couple of years, I realized this is pretty solid. This is going to change the way we work, the way we do things. So I made sure when I came back to India and joined another company, I got into a role where I could do more of this cloud stuff. So I was trying to, get into it, but I was also trying to not, meaning I wasn't there entirely, but I was trying to get into that field, so to speak. Right? So all these years I was learning Java and a bunch of other things as part of the work as well. And then, one thing kind of led to other, got introduced to, Chef, Puppet. I learned Ruby for all these things. So like so much of my learning has been kind of on the job or on the fly, so to speak. Like I probably didn't know so much well about DNS 5 years into my professional career. But if you look at it, that's the beauty of open source and the industry we are in. We can technically learn everything and anything that we want. There is so much out there. There is so much content. There is so many people sharing things, which is the beauty of it. And I'm so thankful to so many actors which played in my education, whether that Google DevFest conference or whether a person I met there called Romin Irani, I still talk to him, get mentorship from him time to time. So it's beautiful. So, one thing led to other. I got into that Chef Puppet kind of world 2013. Then Docker came along 14, 15. I thought, Docker definitely is the next thing. And then I was working on Mesos for another startup for almost a year. And me and my co-founder Girish were talking, and we read this blog from Darren Sheffer. I Build the Cloud is his blog handle. And it talked about how container is going to change the whole, kind of industry, right? And at around the same time, we started the company. Till then, also, I wasn't sure if Kubernetes, Mesos, who is going to be like the dominant or they will probably coexist forever, sort of. And I was still like a Mesos guy, but then Kubernetes took over. So it was exciting to see my own personal evolution and journey, while also the industry is evolving and kind of maturing, so to speak. One thing that I must say that really helped me was I always kept something else going on beyond my work to educate myself, and that has probably paid off more than anything else, literally.
So I think you spoke about a lot of things, and like I was just trying to capture and ask some more questions on that, because I really feel the same. Many times when we speak to quite a few developers or even people who are pursuing, trying to get a job, like they look down on careers like support, but actually support could be a great stepping stone for further career, like product management or customer success or becoming a great salesperson, or you work along with a lot of you take a lot of brand value, you talk to daily customer woes. So this is the place that you really can excel a lot. And like I think you spoke about a right point, and like which many people might not understand, but then support is a great career as well. Yeah, so that's another thing.
Yeah, I think as an individual, you need to definitely work in more than one spaces to be getting a larger, bigger perspective. Like a lot of people say, I just want to work in this X programming language. To me, that's fundamentally wrong. You're basically putting yourself in an IDE black box, so to speak. You need to get slightly more wider exposure. I'm not saying, or I'm not undermining the importance of having depth and understanding one area really, really well. But then there is also breadth that has its own significance.
Yeah, exactly. So talking about the same thing, like you mentioned about App Engine. Like I think I was one of the very few. I think I just got internet at the time, and then like in 2008 or something, like App Engine got into pre-alpha or a beta situation, and then like I just tried. I don't even know about cloud. I don't even know about PaaS. I don't even know Java. So I just tried around with the regular examples. And I still feel awesome about all of this evolution, right? Just took place around us. And then I was really surprised to see. So things like that really help. Like you said, you should always have something. Like at this point of time, I am learning Flutter, which is also really cool. So like you said, everyone should keep having things, in parallel. Like that's really interesting. And then definitely, like you spoke about Roman, and I take a lot of inspiration from Roman. He writes a lot of stuff, talks about APIs. Yeah, it's pretty cool about all the avenue. The community ecosystem sometimes in India is quite helpful if you take advantage of it. Talking about that, I also want to ask about, you spoke about immediately, like I went to US and then I did a bunch of work there, and like I came back and then started something. So are all your work on open source? Because how do you know about Docker, or how did you learn about all of this other ecosystem? Is it at your work, or how did you get to know about that?
Right, and that's an interesting question because actually at my work there was nothing open source at least the first 6 7 years. I was in Java projects primarily. Earlier doing some maintenance and then doing some bug fixes and then got into pure development for a stripping greenfield project. And I think me exploring Google App Engine led me to try to also learn some other things. Basically, you start reading about Google App Engine and then you find something else, and then you find something else. So interestingly, when I was in US for a customer, 2012, I actually so they were a greenfield project, and we were going to build a pretty kind of large integration system, and there was no logging strategy in place. And I had just about heard about this cool project called Logstash. So I actually went to did a demo in one of our bi-weekly sprint, demos like, hey, this is cool thing. We will need it because we are building like a multi-instance system, with so many pieces. And it's difficult to trace things, from one end to other end. And interestingly, nobody knew about Logstash or Elasticsearch back then. I still remember the UI of Logstash was so rudimentary, like it's almost like web browser from 90s, right, so to speak. But the architects and the team really loved that problem that the tool can solve. They eventually, I believe, went with one of the commercial options because of whatever corporate reasons. But that to me was like super cool, like something open source, so cool. So Google App Engine leading me to read about other things. I found Logstash, then I find things like Jenkins and stuff like that. Right? So one thing leads to other kind of thing, and that's how I eventually arrived at Docker, I would say.
I mean, this entire chain is like, you get to learn about what's new. When I could do this, can I do the similar sort of approach to other thing? So that
Right.
became a really a huge advancement for a lot of developers itself, like became. But then like it also feels like you started in support and then like you moved to different roles every time. Like how did you think that I need to move to a different role every time? Is there a queue that you get, or how do you do that? Like every 3 years or 2 years, and that to different careers.
Yeah, I think part of it was just sheer random luck, right? I don't think I made a like conscious move to a greenfield project when I moved to US. So earlier I was in Finland for almost 2 3 years, where I worked in support and a bunch of other roles. Then I came back to India. Then I was again sent back to US, and thankfully it was a greenfield project. And that's where all this Google Logstash and all these things kind of happened. So I would say, although it was a little bit of random hit and miss in the beginning, looking back, so many of those things are actually more useful now that I was able to get different exposures, for like 2 3 years each, so to speak.
So because I kind of got, even though you say it is luck, I believe that probably there is a bit of that you might be ambitious about doing many things, or you might be like really want to look at things quite regularly and learn something. So that might have led to into this thing. But I think I also found out one more thing. Like you were saying that when I went to US, I realized I found out App Engine. So today, I'm not talking about that, but today, if I am a developer in India and I am just out of college, or probably like having 3 years, or I'm in this mid-career stage, and then can I do the same? Can I discover and build or do new things in India, or should I always go to US? Because it's like a current question that many people have.
Right.
Should I
Right.
pursue the American dream?
Yeah, that's a interesting, and a very like probably a question that happens to almost everybody. And I keep telling my friends now from India as well as US that with open source and the kind of technology and internet evolution has happened over the last almost a decade and a half, I think the world is as flat as it can get, at least when it comes to technology. And I would say the opportunities today are almost the same to somebody in India as they are in US. Like if you're starting out today, and a lot of people reach out to me once in a while, from friends and family, what can we do and stuff. And I'm like, pick up one thing. There are so many out there. Maybe like start with a meetup, or start with the intro video, and keep building stuff. Like there is so much out there in the open, so to speak. So I don't think like geography today is a limitation. In fact, if you look at the kind of meetups and the variety of topics that we talk about in Bangalore, Pune, Noida, I'm just amazed. Like even in US, I went to meetups a couple of times, and I was in Portland, which is not like probably the biggest of town there. But if you look at that back then versus what happens today in India, I would say the energy and the learning that you can do just through meetups and connecting with people is immense here.
Yeah, I mean, Interesting to hear from you as well. I have the same sort of opinion that
Right.
we do a lot, and there's a lot of collaboration also happens in India, and which I find very interesting. Now, moving on to the next thing, like you said that you did work about, again talking about the Docker and the cloud revolution, or whatever the area that you worked in. But you did you do any work in the cloud native ecosystem, or how did you get introduced? I see like InfraCloud is also like you said, Fission. There are several other projects like in the Kubernetes ecosystem, I think, so that you work along with or consult in at the workplace. So
Right.
how do you got into this one? And like,
Right. So I think early 2013, we decided to come back to India for some family reasons. And that time, I made sure when I switched the job, I didn't go back to Java world, so to speak. Nothing against Java. I think there is good reasons and good things in Java. But when I moved back, I made sure I joined a company where I could work in the cloud field. Now, one thing that really helped me was writing articles about Google App Engine, Cloud Foundry last couple of years, along with doing some work at Office in terms of Jenkins, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and stuff like that. So when I joined that company, I worked on Chef Puppet. So I was basically implementing Chef and Puppet modules for a bunch of these customers. Then Salt came, so I picked up Salt as well. Ansible, for some reason, I couldn't get a chance to work like full time on. So while this was happening, again, I switched one more time my role and joined a startup. So there I was working full time on Salt, and at the same time, Docker thing was happening. So it was always like I was doing something at work, and I was trying to see what's the next thing I could pick up, beyond work, which could probably become my work like next couple of years, so to speak, right? So Docker happened, and Docker I picked up, and then interestingly, within 6 months, the startup I was working for actually got started implementing Docker. So it was like a chain of chain reaction, so to speak.
yeah. So that's again, but do you see any organizational challenge? Okay, maybe before that, I really want to ask you, so when did you think of starting this up? Like, okay, we need to start something, a company, an organization that probably I could do. When did you think about that? Because you also have a wonderful career. Like, I think you moved to, I don't know that you are in Europe, like you worked in different places, and then when you came back, you didn't look for a job probably after some time, and then you started this thing. What prompted you to do that?
Right. So after I came back, I worked for almost 2.5 years for a large company, and then another 8 months for a startup. So while I was working for that startup, it was very clear that the general DevOps space, there's a lot of help required in the market, and I think that is true to a good extent even today as well. But even bigger, problems did exist back then. So me and this friend of mine, Girish, I knew him from college, and we just met once, and we kept chatting about how things are moving. He also was on the similar journey. He was doing DevOps for a startup. He was like the VP of engineering or whatever for that startup. And then we kept talking, and we realized there is definitely a common problem that we are seeing, a common thread we are seeing, and it makes sense to start us. Now, of course, that wishful thinking is not enough. Thankfully, Girish's company that he was working for got acquired by a larger company, and then one of the previous customers from Girish's organization reached out, and we started like doing some work for them. And then we realized, oh, we got one paying customer, and we started. So then now we are full time. Then we reached out to all of our contacts, from previous, either my article writing or Girish's open source, Cloud Stack Association or Sun Microsystems Association, and all of our customers came from our first degree of connection, and all of that was mostly learning. Like I think early in the 6 months, we wrote this book called Deploying, and Scaling Kubernetes with Rancher. Way early. I think Kubernetes was hardly 1.1 version that back then, and that book got a lot of popularity. We learned a lot, and we also delivered a lot in that book. But also, it was a great point for us in the sense, you get to see the end-to-end spectrum of Kubernetes, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think in one of these tech chats, I really spoke about this, like how Pune has a unique trend of SaaS companies and the developers pursuing products, which also Bangalore has, but it is more in Pune. I see that sometimes, there are several companies which do that. And then also, like, I also see companies owning up a specific community, and they think like, okay, we need to run this meetup, and we need to provide space, which is really, really amazing culture in a way to, foster that improvement of this local tech talent. I see that. InfraCloud runs Kubernetes meetup. What else you do?
Yeah. So when we wrote that book, I think it was October or something, and then we thought, oh, you know what? We now know so much. Maybe it's a good time to share this with the community. So I started the meetup in November 2016. The first meetup I had, there were only 7 people, including myself. So it was a good, humble starting. But I think over time, we have now almost been doing it consistently for last 4 years, month on month. We get almost 70 to 80 people every month now attending the meetup. But yeah, that has been one good thing in the sense we really learned a lot. So why not share that with the community? And that's how we started the Kubernetes Pune meetup.
Interesting. But like I was about to ask this question previously, like, when you did all of this, I know that you have some contacts and then you are trying to talk to them and then propose the work and then probably get things done. But then did you face any organizational challenges when you propose open source to people and say like, okay, see, this is a cool technology I want to implement here, and probably you might want to take up think of commercial subscriptions or something like that later, but this thing really works. I mean, did you ever face problems, or like what sort of things that you have gone through?
Right. So I think the first at least 12 to 18 months of our company, we were still working with early builders, what I would call companies like Rancher, for example, and a bunch of others. So we were still building or helping some of these companies do either DevOps or some of the product engineering, so to speak. Beyond that point is when companies started reaching out to us that, hey, we want to kind of implement Kubernetes. Why don't you help us? Now, coming to challenges, working with, I would say, a couple fairly large organizations who are trying to suddenly move from virtual machines all the way to Kubernetes. The organization challenges, I would say, are a couple of fold. One and the foremost is probably the understanding and education in a given space, because the CNCF landscape for a newbie can be extremely confusing. Like, what do I choose and what do I build out of this, right? And of course, the things are getting better and better as we speak. But it is still, I would say, overwhelming. The second, I would say, a lot of ways of thinking before in terms of infrastructure being static versus dynamic, or things being software defined versus they were, like some other way defined, so to speak, right? That shift takes some education, convincing, either with demos or whatever that works before we kind of say that, hey, this is the world we need to move to, sort of.
Interesting. I also like when me as a developer, when I'm trying to propose something, see, we could talk about do this thing with that and also get a lot of additional leverage in taking all of these features and also probably contribute, and that would help brand. So when I propose these sort of things, then people would come up, frankly, used to come up, at least it's not visible, like open source is not secure or like how do you manage security? So there are a lot of things which also might exist in other softwares as well. It's all about how do you manage your stuff. So that is one interesting thing that I found out, but I think that is no more there, and people are like really like with SaaS leading the thing, and I think it is no more further not there, and then people are like quite open to pursue different things. So I'm coming to SaaS. I think anyway we spoke about that. So like, what do you think about general SaaS? What's going on, and what in your mind, and like how much did you work around this sort of building, helping, or like moving people to SaaS? What do you think about that?
I think SaaS is definitely, I would say, today well understood as a model of delivery of applications. Having said that, I think there is still a large world out there which is still not kind of SaaS, still on-prem, or whatever the other modes of kind of existence are there in the compute world. I think if you look at the last, I would say, few years, almost every other product that we thought is not possible to do SaaS way is almost getting SaaSified, so to speak. But there is still a long way to go. And I think in general today, if you ask, I think people also understand that cloud is the way to go. So things are moving in that sense. So I generally see in the innovator.
Okay, I think we missed you in between, but then I kind of understand what you probably want to say. So I kind of like understand this whole spectrum of what we spoke, like cloud and different tools for developers. So if I want to grow in a career, right? I mean, if I have some specific knowledge about some clouds, so how do you have any suggestions to developers or people who are, because you also lead a lot of big engineering team, I believe, like, and then you also help people contribute to your developers, like contributing. to open source. So what are the things that you suggest in general that could be of help to other people, like, or what worked out for you as well? You can tell that.
Sure. I think if you're working like full time and if you already have experience in, one good thing to pick up would be pick up something adjacent to what you know. For example, a programming language which is different than Java, maybe Python, maybe Golang, maybe Rust, right? Whatever is that. If you already know certain clouds and if you know a programming language, then probably pick up something slightly more further, like maybe pick up Docker or maybe some other framework, so to speak, right? Elastic. It could be anything, for example. And of course, you have to first spend some time in learning that out on your own or through various courses or whatever. But that's not enough. That's just still theoretical experience. The next logical step would be to find a project in your organization where you could be the champion who understands some amount of that technology, but could be putting that to use, so to speak, right? Or it could be within your unit or it could be or wherever is that. I think that's the next area pretty adjacent to what you're doing, and then learn enough to do something more concrete, and then find a place or a work or a project or do your own small project to put that in use, so to speak. That I would say is a good cycle. If you keep rinsing and repeating, is a pretty good workable cycle over a period of time.
Yeah, I think we again, I mean, probably there is an internet connection disruption, but then like I kind of understood that try to learn more skills which are adjacent to probably whatever the work that you are trying to do. Maybe yeah, I believe that's what you're trying to say. But then like
Right.
quite a few people are confused between frameworks. Like if I'm in the mobile technology and then like should I pursue this, or if think about like even not just mobile, even in the backend side, whenever we are talking about databases, people have confusion whether should I go ahead and only learn NoSQL or only use NoSQL DBs, or go ahead with RDBMS. Would RDBMS be there? There are more things that I have learned. So what do you think about these sort of things? Like when people have this sort of, should everyone be a generalist or specialist? So this sort of debate will keep coming up, right? So,
right. Yeah, I think there are two facets to that question. If I have to, kind of qualify. So one thing is, if you're, for example, in backend and you understand the backend really well, maybe shifting to something completely remote, like mobile development, might be too far of a stretch. So I have had somebody reach out to me recently. He has been working on the NetApp and those kind of storage backend, so to speak, but the very traditional NetApp, and stuff like that. And he was asking me, he was already like 6-7 years into the industry, and he was asking me, should I do a data science course for almost a year, taking a break for 6 months from work and stuff. I was like, that's probably too much of a stretch. Why don't you understand the software-defined storage, understand a little bit of Kubernetes, and that could be the great logical move, right? So again, I kind of think that what build on top of that, unless you're really, you want to really start from scratch in something completely different. If that is your wish, that's great. But definitely, if you connect the dots, if you build on top of what you have, that is one good thing, I would say. And secondly, like it probably goes back to the previous point I was making. Try to build. So if for example, storage, look at what is happening next in the storage, right? Because if you look at it fundamentally, last again 2 decades, as much things have changed, fundamentally they have actually remained the same. I mean, if you look at somebody knowing Chef, Puppet, Terraform, for example, I'm saying, right? Terraform is still pretty widely in use, but if you look at somebody using Chef or Puppet, inherently you're dealing with virtual machines. Docker does almost similar thing in a different fashion, if you have to put it that way, right? So whatever you learned there is not going to go waste entirely. So don't think that the things just because, and again, so that's the kind of cycle of avoiding the frameworks or tools trap. Basically, focus on fundamentals. If you understand fundamentals in one tool or technology well, they might as well be applicable in something else.
Interesting. That's great. Actually, I think you summarized a lot of. You brought in a personal. You shared your personal story about like how you have transitioned, and you shared your cloud story, your learning. It's all really interesting, and also like for the viewers specifically, if you look at this thing, it's like a perfect developer journey. Like you could definitely be a C-level exec like Vishal. And really, I'm saying, because I've seen quite a few people have done their different work in different places and still being able to like run a lot of things and their approach. But then Vishal, I think I also one last question before we end the session today is like, what are the projects currently, open source projects that probably you lead or you run or you actively participate in, either from the organizational level or personally as well? So can you please tell about that?
I would just like to take one small kind of diversion before we come to that event. I think we talked about tools framework, we talk about technology evolution and stuff like that. And I think one important point that I missed out, we also underestimate probably the role of something like communication and design. So I would say a lot of stuff that I got, I think a lot of progress and problems are inherently, if you understand communication well across teams, across customers, across problem domains, and if you can design. When I say design, literally uh, any design skill that you have spent learning in your school or college or whatever, if you can apply that to these problems. So we often probably overestimate the influence of technology, but sometimes underestimate the influence of basic communication or basic software engineering practices. I also want to raise the point that things other than technology, like communication, being able to design, draw, communicate well, and write well, are extremely important. And I would, as an engineer, as part of my either schooling or later after schooling, also would dedicate certain time on that, because that factors eventually matter a lot more beyond technology as well.
I mean, I would completely agree to it. 5 years back, before I was in Bangalore, I'm like nowhere. I would have a lot of stage fear, and I had a lot of stage fear, and then I couldn't do a lot of things that I'm doing today, and I'm 100% sure about it. But then after specifically attending my first meetup, I got inspiration from several other developers, and then I also felt that, when okay, I also know this, and why can't I go and talk about it when I'm able to express myself? So that sort of a thing helped me a lot. And having a personal blog, writing on Medium, writing on a popular publication for Medium, leading a meetup, there are many things I think we can do. There are ample opportunities pro bono which we really like. And I mean, as a developer, I really still like going to Java user group meetups and just sit and listen, ask questions, and disturb the speaker a lot to get to know more information. That's kind of a unique thing. And I believe, like you said, it would really help when I'm communicating to others. I'm able to put through my things on a whiteboard, and probably if I go to a design interview or something, it internally helps. Like, it kind of like, I know how to express this thing, right? Several times it's also quite useful. Like you said, it's important how to tell what you're thinking in your mind. That's what an interviewer might look. You are exactly on point, and like exactly right about the communication thing. Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
You talk about the open source.
Yeah, I'll just end with one quote which I was having, with my customer earlier this week. He said the critical reasoning and courage to ask questions are the only two qualities that we need, in an engineer. And I totally, kind of agree to that.
Exactly.
Coming to open source projects, I think Fission is one project we have been contributing for quite a while now, and we are driving also the releases and a lot of other investment in terms of development as users are, asking. So it's a serverless project on top of Kubernetes, written in all Golang, along with Kubernetes APIs, of course. BotCube is another project which was born out of an hackathon within InfraCloud. It's a bot for chatting with Kubernetes clusters. It allows you to talk to Kubernetes clusters from Slack, Mattermost, Microsoft Teams, bunch of other places. There's also a lot of auditing, policy kind of stuff. It's a great project for starters who are looking to start in Golang and Kubernetes in general. We also recently our customer open sourced this project called Tinkerable, which is an open source bare metal provisioning tool. It basically allows you to boot things at scale, on machines, and then run a workflow to do certain things on the bare metal kind of machines. We also been active on the Yugabyte side, which is a distributed SQL database, global scale, almost like Google Cloud Spanner, but open source. And we've been writing, a bunch of stuff around Yugabyte stuff like Terraform, packaging for Google Cloud and stuff as part of our work. I think those are some of the projects that I kind of remember top of my head. There must be a bunch of more which are on the website page and on our GitHub page as well.
Yeah, interesting. I think for all the folks, if you want to know more about the projects that he spoke about, I think we'll share you, put the link in the description. I have personally seen Fission, Tinkerbell. I think you recently spoke about some of these about in the CNCF webinars as well. And then there are a bunch of other projects like KubeBert, or I have seen. I think I have been discussed with some of the engineers, and then they spoke about what and all they do. It's quite interesting, and then I'll put some of these links in the thing so that you can go and look at everyone. So that brings us to the end of the session, and really thank you for talking to us, and your experiences, your suggestions, and also a lot of learnings that you shared. It's quite useful to a normal developer, and I would see if you want to share anything more, and then before we end the session.
Thanks for having me. I keep joking about this. If me, a mechanical engineer, can do this, definitely you can do it. So keep a goal and keep working towards it. But yeah, thanks for talking with me, Arvind.
Yes, thank you, Vishal. I think yes, you serve as an inspiration to a lot of people. So Vishal can be you followed on Twitter. He shares a lot of opinions about tech and things that he follows, and writes interesting stuff as well. So you could find him there. Then other than that, if you have any questions or you want to do anything further, you want to talk at this particular place, you can reach me out at send me a DM here. Or of course, you reach me out on the YouTube as well. There's my email, so that you can write an email to me. So that brings us the end of the session, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thanks, Vishal, for joining us today, and thanks everyone for staying this evening. Thank you.